What's up, and welcome back to the Inside the Rink Podcast. Tonight we'll be talking about a couple of trades that went down, on top of some extensions, and what has been happening around the league this past week. And even tonight we had some interesting fireworks. But let me welcome in my co-host tonight, Conrad. Conrad, how are you this week?
Chris, I'm doing great this week. I don't know what the weather's like for you. I'm going to start off with our weather update here, but it's been freezing cold since we last recorded. But otherwise, a lot of hockey to watch, a lot to digest. We're going to get into that. But how are you doing today?
I think the cold is heading my way. I saw something, I think this coming Saturday, it's supposed to be like 6 degrees. It's supposed to be freezing tonight and tomorrow. Gotta love New England weather. But yes, a lot has happened in the past week with the hockey world, and we get to talk about it tonight. And the first thing, we had a big trade yesterday. Rasmus Andersson was dealt to the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for Zach Whitecloud, a 2027 first-round pick, which is a top 10 protected pick, a conditional 2028 second pick, which becomes a first-round pick if Vegas wins the Cup this season, and prospect Abram Wiebe. Not a bad trade. The Flames are retaining 50% of Andersson's $4.55 million deal. And, I mean, you covered the trade last night for us on the website with a great article. What are your thoughts on the trade right away?
So the trade immediately helps both teams because Calgary recoups, or they don't recoup draft capital, but they get stronger in the area of having a little bit more flexibility, whether or not they want to draft in the next two drafts. And also, Chris, you look at Vegas and what they're doing. They're obviously trying to win now, and that's going to be their goal at the end of the day. But Calgary is going to be a very fun team to watch. Given who they pick and wherever they land in the next two drafts, because these are two really deep drafts, they could end up with some pretty high picks. Even a 30th, 32nd overall pick doesn't hurt them because, as I said, deep draft, but also all things considering, Calgary has they're going to have to get younger with the contracts that they do have on the books. A lot of respected veterans in the locker room, but they're going to get into the situation where guys have to come up.
Yeah, Andersson this year, 48 games. He has 30 points on 10 goals, 20 assists. He's a +3. One thing right away, and I read about this again today, but it stuck to me right when I saw the trade come through, was he's going to be reunited with former D-man Noah Hanifin, who is also on Vegas. And I got to imagine they're going to pair them together and keep that chemistry that they built in Calgary going. But I like this trade. And it seemed, I saw the tweet before we came live when we talked about it a little bit off air, that, it seemed like it came out that he wasn't going to sign an extension, at least as of right now, which kind of took the other teams that were involved out of the conversation. And Vegas was still there, and they gave a great offer. And this worked, like you said, worked out well for both sides.
And immediately, like, the one thing I have to think when it comes to this trade is, does Vegas risk their defensive corps right now by hoping that Hanifin and Andersson still have the same level of chemistry that they did in Calgary, or do they try to ease into it? Chris, there's a lot of ways that they can approach this, but maybe if Vegas kind of gets a little bit of cold feet, maybe Andersson's name pops back up. I highly doubt that, but there's so much things to consider. The Hanifin-Andersson thing, I look at and I kind of tiptoe around it because you can't immediately expect it to work out the same way.
Yeah, I'm looking right now just to see what they have listed, and I'm trying to remember. I thought Whitecloud was paired with Hanifin as it was. So, I mean, they moved off Whitecloud, like you said, the chemistry. Maybe that is exactly the Andersson slides right in there. Because right now, I mean, they don't have Andersson listed in the defensive pairings from what I see. It looks like it's Lauzon, Shea Theodore, and then Hanifin's with, Korczak. So
I can't even correct you on that one, Chris.
That's the way it sits right now. So and Megna's paired with Hutton on the third pairing, and Andersson's not going to be on the third pairing. It's a top pairing or a second pairing. So it'll be interesting to see how Vegas works that out. Great trade for Vegas, a team, and we'll get to my thoughts on that whole thing in general in a minute. But Kiefer Sherwood this morning was traded to the San Jose Sharks from the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for a second-round pick in 26 and 27, along with defenseman Cole Clayton. Sherwood this season in 44 games has 23 points on 17 goals and 6 assists, and he's a minus 12 for the Canucks. To me, right away, when this trade hit, it just screamed that the Sharks are going to have so much scoring. You know, obviously Sherwood's numbers are down a little bit this year, but they can mix and match their lineup. The top line right now is Graf, Celebrini, and Will Smith. The second line is Eklund, Wenberg, and Toffoli. You're going to have the possibility of maybe even moving Toffoli to the third line. Like that right away to get adding Sherwood screams that to me. I don't know what your thoughts were right when the breaking news hit this morning.
So my immediate thought, Chris, I looked at the trade. I wasn't surprised as Sherwood was linked to San Jose for a little bit and over the last 2 months, this sort of started to develop, and you heard a lot more and you kind of read a lot more, whether you listen to podcasts or you read it, is Sherwood was going to end up being moved, and San Jose ended up emerging as a front runner because, one, they met the price, or they were able to find a neutral ground of pricing with Vancouver, but they were also willing to bring in a guy who's an unrestricted free agent next season. And San Jose, this is a trade where, okay, you look at the bare bones of it. If he makes an impact and signs long term, that's another building block to what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish with Celebrini and that core. Maybe Sherwood becomes an important piece for them, but Chris, I look at it as just from the outside. If it doesn't work out, this is a low risk move that, okay, he can go into free agency and find somewhere new to be. But for now, it's low risk. Both teams waters early, and there's a lot of time left before they can make a decision.
Yeah, right away to me, and I look at this, and this is where I say a lot of these trades right now are happening in the Western Conference. We just mentioned Andersson. We talk about Sherwood, and a couple weeks ago we had Quinn Hughes. The big trades, you're seeing them happen in the West, and I wonder if, and we'll get to the Eastern Conference in a little bit, but are all these teams looking at the Avalanche and saying that is the top tier of this conference right now? We're gonna have to beat that team if we want to be a cup team at some point in time, some point in time this season. So, are they loading up now to compete against the Avalanche? And to me, the Sharks are the biggest surprise this season. Like, we thought they were going to be good, but nobody had them being a playoff team. And right now, they sit in a playoff spot. They just won against the Panthers tonight, 4-1. So they add to their lead for a playoff spot. To me, I like this move. It gives them more, like I said, more scoring in the bottom six. It allows them to shuffle their lineups to have more scoring in the bottom six. On top of that, they also called up Laurent Brossoit today. So now they have the goaltending piece that they traded for. They're just loading up. I think this team is very scary in the playoffs. Again, as long as they don't play Vegas, because they've struggled with Vegas all season. But I like what the Sharks are doing.
Yeah, and I kind of hinted at it is being one, low risk, and two, if it works out, that's just another piece you have long term. So, Chris, it's a great move. Sherwood, if it works out in San Jose, that could probably be where he retires, and maybe long term, this is a move that San Jose look back on, and it becomes a catapult into something bigger for what they had anticipated.
One thing you just said there, and I find this interesting and very odd, is as I was looking and covering more about it today when I wrote the trade piece, Sherwood now is on his 5th team in 8 seasons. And that's an interesting thing to me. Like, why is he continuously getting moved? Makes me a little hesitant, but if he fits with the Sharks and they find the right pieces, and this is a team that's missing Ty Dellandrea and Philip Kurashev as of right now, who are both on the IR. So, like, they're not even fully healthy adding a piece like Sherwood. Imagine what this team's going to look like when they do get fully healthy.
Yeah, and producer Connor just put in the chat is good players on bad teams equals beware. So that's another very fair observation to make. I just pulled up Kiefer Sherwood, his stats and whatnot. Being 30 years old, he's going to turn 31 this year in March. He's a winger and whatnot. 23 points on the season. Chris, he's 2 goals away from tying his season high, 3 from breaking it. He set his season high last season. You got to be ultra cautious around this sort of stuff, and like producer Connor put again, is they only have 13 players signed in San Jose next season. A lot of cap space, 50 million. That gives them a lot of room to play. Maybe Sherwood doesn't sign a massive ticket extension, but it's just something that kind of gets him tied over. And maybe he retires at 35, 36 years old, around that area in his career. But his career progression is he didn't bloom until the 23-24 season, and he's found a full-time role just recently. So maybe he does get that big extension, but that's something you got to be. It's a buyers beware kind of deal. And Chris, you and I are going to probably talk a lot of buyers beware deals and whatnot as the trade deadline slowly approaches. So much to consider here, and Sherwood's the front right now.
Yeah, and how they slide him into this lineup really is going to be interesting to me. I like looking at their lineup. Him playing alongside William Eklund is something I think that could help his career as well. But definitely going to talk about the Sharks and where he fits and how things progress with him along multiple deals throughout this rest of the season. Some actual signings that happened this last week. Logan Mailloux signs a 1-year, $850,000 extension with the St. Louis Blues. And Montreal extends Alexander Texier to a 2-year, $2.5 million extension. These two, Texier was on the Blues. He got released, signs with the Canadiens, and has seemed to fit right in with them right away. 27 games with Montreal. He's got 16 points. He's a +7. Mailloux, they acquired him from Montreal. Ironically, there's two teams right there, both kind of in a way swapping. Like, they didn't obviously swap straight up or anything like that, but Mailloux was with Montreal. They traded him on July 1st in the Zachary Bolduc trade. He's a 22-year-old defenseman, 34 games this year for St. Louis, got a goal and an assist. It seems like with St. Louis too, is they're just extending all of their defensemen. I think we talked about that 2 weeks ago when they locked up somebody else. I forget who it was. Broberg last week.
Yeah.
So, two interesting extensions. What are your thoughts on both of those?
Well, first, I'm going to go on Mailloux here. Is he's getting a more prominent role. He's not the guy who's going to put up a lot of points in a season. He's a defensive defenseman. And Texier, that's another guy, given where he started the season and the termination that had happened, and now getting his footing where he is, Chris, that's kind of, it's great for the player that things have worked out ultimately and it was the best path forward. But speaking more to the Mailloux and the St. Louis deal, you'd mentioned is it feels like they're locking up all of their defensemen, and it's because one, they are, and two, you don't know where the team is going to be at next year. And take a look at a lot of teams around the league where either they were competing last year in the for playoffs or locked in for a playoff spot, or maybe this year they are well out of it and they're kind of regrouping and getting their footing back. So a lot of teams are weighing these options, and you're going to want to bring back a lot of these guys that made you successful. But when you look at it at the end of the day, if they aren't a key contributor like right then and there, decisions have to be made, and business is business. obviously Logan Mailloux in St. Louis when he was traded for Baldu. That was a pure like 1-for-1 kind of deal, guy for guy. When he went into St. Louis, I watched a couple of games and he looks confident when he's playing to what he's expected to play and the game he knows he can play. When he's kind of out of position, Chris, he doesn't look like himself. So it's a low risk extension, kind of gets him to the next season, and you and I will obviously be watching a lot of games over time, but we're going to see how that kind of fits in.
Yeah, Mayu, to me, he's been paired with Cam Fowler, who the Blues also extended this season. They extended him in September. Maybe that's a veteran leading a young defenseman and getting him to the right spot he needs to be for his career, and keeping them together for another season will do that. As for Texier, him sliding into that top line and finding, a great chemistry with Caulfield and Suzuki has been fantastic to watch. Again, I think both of us had Montreal in the playoffs. I think I had them at least winning. I think I had them winning the division, if not at least.
You had them winning the division. I had them second.
Okay, so I thought I had them winning the division. Adding him has been great for that team, and he's found a rejuvenation to his career. He was struggling with the Blues, wasn't fitting well, and this has been something that's turned his whole career around. In playing with the two players he is, in Suzuki and Caulfield, has helped him find his game a little bit more this season, and I think you're really going to see more of a breakout coming with him. And Montreal having him down for 2 more years is great for them.
Yeah, like you hit the nail on the head with that one.
So we're going to continue on the week that was, and let's start off with tonight. Let's have a little fun. We had a little goalie fight tonight in Sunrise, Florida, as the Sharks and Panthers were playing. Evan Rodriguez was a little scrap along the boards after the whistle, and Alex Nedeljkovic took a little unnecessary comment to it, came right in, went right at Rodriguez, and right down the ice came Sergei Bobrovsky, and we had our first goalie fight of the season.
And you say first, which I find kind of funny because it's going to be the last, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
And last at the NHL level, I should say, because any other league, it's a wild west with that. These are not the two guys I expected to end up in a goalie fight. Nedeljkovic and Bobrovsky. I watched the video and whatnot before we hopped on. Both of them got 2 minutes for leaving the crease and 5 for fighting. Chris, it's quite the situation, and this is something that's going to be played on highlight reels for many years until the next goalie fight, or who knows, maybe these guys retire and this is part of their highlight package, because not a lot of punches were thrown, but a goalie fight's a goalie fight, and the crowd was behind it.
Yeah, the only thing I take away from watching the video over and over again was Bobrovsky took forever to take his helmet off. Nedeljkovic went right for it. Took the helmet off, was ready to go because he knew it was coming, and Bobrovsky just seemed hesitant. Like he was angry about the situation, obviously came flying down the ice, but just was hesitant to take his helmet off. And goalie fights get played forever. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the video of Tim Thomas and Carey Price. And again, 2 goalies went right at it, both of them ready to go, took their helmets off, and ready to fight. This was great. I love goalie fights. Something different you don't see very often, unless, I feel like you see it a lot more in the minor leagues, like AHL, ECHL, all those leagues. I feel like we're good for at least 2 there. The NHL level, you don't see it as often. I hopped on, I was waiting for you and producer Connor to join, and I heard something in the corner, and I was like, oh, what's going on behind me? Turned around, and I saw at the tail end of it. Twitter blew up immediately. Love to see it. Love to see it.
And that's exactly it. I remember when Fleury wanted to go with Binnington a few years ago, and the fans booed the refs for breaking up the fight. So it's a spectacle that you don't get to see often. I haven't seen it at the AHL level covering the AHL. I haven't seen it covering the NHL either, Chris, but who knows, maybe I'll be lucky enough to see such a spectacle in person, but this is not something you see every day. And when you do, it gets played for a long time. Goalie goals, much rarer. Those are played for even longer.
Those are also very special. I mean, love seeing those. I think we were close to one the other night. I forget who it was, but somebody just missed one, and I remember seeing the tweet. I'm just drawing a blank on the name. I believe Nedeljkovic also has a goalie goal.
Yeah, he has one at the NHL and AHL level last season. And then I believe it was the AHL game that he played is he had a goal and an assist. So he was one fight away from a Gordie Howe hat trick that game.
Gotta love goalie goals and goalie fights. So moving, I mentioned Tim Thomas. Let's go to his former team, the Boston Bruins. They're on an absolute tear. 6 straight wins. They've won 8 of their last 9. They have points in 9 of their last 10. During their 6-game winning streak, they're averaging 4.5 goals a game. They're only allowing 1.2 goals against. 2 shutouts in that time frame. They're right back in a playoff spot, and they're 3 points back of Montreal and 6 points back of first. This coming week, they have the Dallas Stars on the road. Then they're home for the Golden Knights and those Montreal Canadiens, which they've already had one game at the Bell Center this year where it broke out into a fight. The second game, right away, another fight happened. Are we in for some fireworks this week with the Bruins and the Canadiens? And is this team for real?
Well, we're gonna see what the Bruins are made of, Chris, and I feel like next week we're probably gonna be talking about the polar opposite because that feels like what it is every single week. I know the Lightning were on a 9-game winning streak the last time we talked about them, and the Atlantic Division, it's a yard sale of really good teams competing to get into the playoffs right now, and we're gonna talk about the Atlantic Division and the mess that's there right away, Chris. If you look at the standings, the Bruins they're 3 points back of third in the division, and they got the Buffalo Sabres just 1 point behind them. If they want to show that they're for real and they're willing to make the playoffs and fight that fight to be competitive and sell those tickets, this is the time to do it because you're hitting the 50-game mark of your season, but you're also showing that, hey, just because you had a few down years and one pretty piss poor year, let's put it blunt here, you got to show that, hey, you still have that thick skin. You can still fight the good fight and come in and win games. And now they're on a 6-game winning streak. They're 8-1-1 in their last 10. And you said they have points in their last 9. So that shows where they are as a team. But I'm going to just emphasize one last time. If you want to show what you're made of this year, this is the time to do it. And you mentioned the teams that they're facing. Great timing here.
Yeah, that division's a mess, and we'll just go right into it. The Atlantic Division right now has Tampa Bay leading the way at 64 points. The Red Wings aren't tied with them at 64 points. However, the Lightning have 3 games in hand. The Canadiens are 3 points back of Red Wings and Lightning. Then you have the Bruins at 58 points, the Sabres at 57, the Maple Leafs at 56, the Panthers at 53 points, and the Senators at 51. The Senators have dropped 2 straight. They're kind of falling out of it right now. Everybody in that division, aside from Florida and Ottawa entering play tonight, all have positive goal differentials. This division is just chaos. And the Red Wings, being a Red Wings fan, they're right. I think they're a playoff team. We talked about Toronto last week right away, and they were on their streak, and they seem to have fallen off a little bit where Boston and Buffalo have both passed them. It's back to the curse. We talk about this almost every week. I feel like we talk about a team and they just fall a little bit. Toronto was last week, maybe this week's Boston. Producer Connor a couple weeks ago asked us to curse the Bruins. We mentioned the Bruins, and down he goes.
Yeah, and Chris, when we go about things, you and I are looking at this from the I want to say from the outside looking on the inside, and you mentioned positive goal differentials. Take a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning. I know Colorado has a plus 78, but like a plus 46 is incredible. Plus 78 is otherworldly, and with just what the Bruins are doing right now, like that's something to talk about in its own, because they were not great last season, but they sold things off last year. They made a decision on their season, and it feels like this year they're rebounding well from that. And I know the past few seasons for the Red Wings, they've been in a position where they could make the playoffs, and if they make the right moves to support themselves long term, they could get into that spot to where they are realistic contenders in the top 3 in the Atlantic. I don't know, and I'm hesitant to say that they are going to be in the top 3 because of just how much they've fallen. Just Chris, look at the last 2 seasons for the Red Wings, and I know you follow them a lot closer than I do. When they fall, they fall, and 32 games left for the Red Wings. I said it for the Bruins. That's the time for them to show what they're made of and show their skin in the game. But the Atlantic Division, it's currently shaping up that 5 teams are going to make the playoffs there, and this is one run of the season that when you just put everything together is who's going to be in the top 3 and who's in the wild card. Who's going to face the top teams in that division? That's what it's shaping up to be.
It is such a mess of a division. The Red Wings, to me, 9 straight seasons not in the playoffs. They should be there, but they seem to collapse every year in March. So that March is a question mark for that team. I agree with you, and it's funny looking back now. I asked you 3 weeks ago. We had the Flyers and the Penguins in the 2 wildcard spots, and I asked, are these 2 teams playoff teams, or are we going to have 4-4, or what are we going to have? And we both said 4-4 for the Eastern Conference, and now we look at it and it's 5-3. And I honestly, now watching more and more, my opinion is changing where I agree with you. I think it's 5 from the Atlantic and 3 from the Metro. And I look at this and it's hard to say Boston, Buffalo is the 2 wildcard teams. I personally think the 3 teams as they are right now in the Atlantic are staying that way. It might be a little different where like it's Tampa, Montreal, and then Detroit. But the wildcard teams, I have a hard time looking at Boston. And as much as I would love to see the Sabres back in the playoffs, I just lean towards the Maple Leafs and the Panthers being those other 2 teams. Now, the Panthers have their own issues. They got Matthew Tkachuk back. That's a huge boost to that team. And maybe that's exactly what they need to get them to that playoff spot. And they're still right there. But this whole division is, I mean, from what it sounds like, what we just said between the 2 of us right there, neither of us really see Ottawa as a playoff team right now.
And I think Ottawa last year, I think it was more of they rallied behind themselves. 1, as a team, and 2, as a group of men that just, they had a lot to build on, and they pushed together. They kind of banded together and whatnot. Looking at the state of their team this year, and given that they don't have a lot of turnover from last year's team, it becomes a structural thing and a long-term focus on what you want to do. Because right now, when you look at the wild card, Ottawa sits 7th on the wild card rankings. They're 6 points out. Sure, like you're tied in games and whatnot. You have game teams but most of the teams, you either have a game in hand on you or you're tied with them with 48 games. That's not a lot of flexibility going into this part of the season. Trade deadline's getting closer. Teams are starting to make moves before the Olympic roster freeze, and Ottawa, with all things considering and all due respect to them, they don't seem like they're in it to go back to where they were last season and have that success.
Yeah, I just pulled up Ottawa's schedule as of late, and they've dropped two straight, like I said, but both of those losses are in overtime. And I wonder with this team, like you said, I mean, they rode their momentum last season to make the playoffs, but I wonder if partially right now the reason why they're falling out is they're missing Linus Olmark. And that could be a boost to them when he does come back. Because, I mean, coming up, they have a tough stretch after. They have Columbus on Tuesday, and these two games are on the road, at Columbus and then at Nashville. And then it's versus the Hurricanes, then the Golden Knights, then the Avalanche. That 3-game stretch right there against the powerhouses of the NHL right now could realistically put you completely out of it. We talked about the Rangers a couple weeks ago as a team. They lose Shesterkin. You know, goalies are voodoo. We've said that before, but sometimes having your number one goalie like that and then not having him for a certain amount of time can really end your season. Like Ottawa seems they're falling out of it, and then not having Olmark going into a 5-game stretch like that, that could hurt you, and that could really end it all for you. And then Buffalo being the team they have, turning things around. Toronto's got a stretch coming up where they got the Red Wings, they got the Golden Knights, they got the Avalanche. Like they're all heading into that tough. Like it seems like a lot of the Atlantic is heading into that tough stretch where it's time for you to put up or shut up. Like, are you going to be a playoff team? Can you compete with the big dogs of the NHL right now, or are you just going to fold and you don't deserve to be in this conversation right now as a playoff team?
Yeah, and a lot of teams are going to find that out, but I just want to kind of roll it back very quickly here before we move on. What you said about Ottawa and their number one goaltender, did you see the comments that were made on Levi Merilainen by
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Who was that?
You need to make more than 10 saves in a game and whatnot. Is I'm paraphrasing it, but that's pretty harsh. That's a pretty harsh thing to say. Jake Sanderson, producer Connor, just put in the chat. Those are pretty harsh comments to make about your goaltender. And funny enough, the next night, Grand Rapids, they beat the Milwaukee Admirals, and their goaltender makes 10 saves in a game to win the game. Grand Rapids is rolling, but Ottawa can't make 10 saves to win their game. So a lot of tough comments to be thrown around, Chris. And at this point in the season, it just feels like frustrations are going to start to boil with certain teams. Last week we talked about coaching changes and whatnot. We're starting to see that in the wild card in the Eastern Conference, and that could start to just, I don't want to say boil over again, but it could start to really pile up here as teams aren't meeting expectations.
It's funny you just said that. It made me think. That was the other night, and then I wanted to look up quickly who played. I thought it was Reimer last night against the Red Wings when they lost 4-3 in overtime. Reimer had 30 saves. So, you know, yes, Merilainen had 13 saves. It's at the end of the day, that game was 6-5. And he made 13 saves when they lost the Canadiens. He made 13 saves. I get it. But 30 shots on goal, or 30 saves last night on 34 shots on goal. If you just had one more in regulation, you're not going to overtime against the Red Wings and you're winning that game. So he makes his comments that the team doesn't show up the next game. So, you know, you kind of put your foot in your mouth in that situation for Sanderson. But Ottawa's struggling. They need Olmark back, I think. The Atlantic Division is just, like I said, chaos, and it's going to continue. I think each week we're going to talk about a different team from that division in a playoff spot. Very well, like next week, we mentioned the Bruins tonight and their win streak. We come into next week's episode, and we're talking about the Maple Leafs and the Sabres battling it out for those 2 wild card spots. Or even Florida. I know Florida lost tonight, but Florida's another team right away. Getting Tkachuk back's a huge boost. But a team that isn't worrying about the chaos behind them and is just pulling away the way things stand right now is the Carolina Hurricanes, who have won 2 straight entering today Tonight was their third straight win. They beat the Buffalo Sabres this afternoon. They have a 7-point lead over the Islanders entering today, which I believe is now 9, unless the Islanders have played, and I did not see them finish their game. At this team, we talked about them coming into the season. I think they're the best team, hands down, in the Eastern Conference. And, they lose Kochetkov for the season. Andersson's having his slump, but they just answered the bell right away with Brandon Bussi. And I sent you and producer Connor before the show, Brandon Bussi for Vezina, plus 8,000 right now for odds, getting no love. And I think he very well should. I saw the stat before we came live. He's won 18 of his first 22 games, which is an NHL record. He has the record for the most wins through his first 10 starts in his career. And another name, too, besides Bussi, is Andrei Svechnikov right now is on an absolute tear. He has 7 points in his last 3 games, including today's game. So he's got 5 goals and 2 assists in his last 3 games. I mean, this team is just clicking on all cylinders, and they're going to add come the trade deadline. This team is just going to get better.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned about them getting better. 31-15-4 across 50 games this year. 7-2-1 in their last 10, and they're finding more than just one way to win, and that means a lot. Whereas I know a lot of teams, when they're in the basement of their division or even the league, it can be seen as you're finding ways to lose. But the Carolina Hurricanes, sure, they've lost 19 games between regulation and overtime, but 31 wins, you're finding way to pull out wins and come ahead of other teams. Whereas I look at I just look up and down, or not the roster, the division. It seems like other teams are finding ways to kind of give Carolina that reprieve. Points in division matter so much when it comes to playoff seeding, and they've kind of taken advantage of that the last few years. When they go into this year's playoffs and make their run, because they're due to make a run, whether or not it's to the Stanley Cup final or the Eastern Conference final or the second round, whatever it is, they're due to do something. And I know you and I are going to talk about that in depth a lot. We're also going to focus on the fact that Carolina made some pretty key additions in the offseason that, hey, when you go all things considered, they're going to build into something more. Do they have a missing piece that could benefit? Do they have a piece that's missing from their roster that could take them and push them over the top? I don't know, Chris. That's one thing I want you to kind of weigh in on here.
I just look at this lineup, and I look at the lineup they put out today and the way the lines were set up, and this might make your eyebrows raise a little bit. But Nikolai Ehlers was on the third line today with Jordan Staal and Jordan Martinook. And I think, to me, that just screams the depth this team has. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago. I wrote a piece about it a while back. They're linked to Artemi Panarin. And to me, adding him to this team, to me, that puts him on the line with Ehlers, Staal, and then you put Panarin, because Jackson Blake's having a great season. Seth Jarvis is this team is so deep, and they keep calling up Bradley Nadeau keeps coming up, and he keeps making appearances, and then whenever he's in the lineup, he produces for this team. And it's just this, they have the pieces to make a deep run, and I don't want to see them. I'm nervous about what trade they make, what they give up, because they have a big name in Jackson Blake. I mentioned Nadeau already as well. I don't want to see either of those names moved in a trade, and because I think they're just building. They're building a core. They have guys locked up, and losing Kochetkov and having Bussi, it's just they haven't missed a beat. You lose a goalie who helped you make a deep run, and you lose. We talked about Danault. when he was getting moved from LA to Montreal and how they had floated out Kotkaniemi as a possible piece to move in that deal. If he's the guy that they're moving, okay. But I don't know what piece on this team that somebody's going to want to add that they can afford to lose.
Yeah, and the roster, the way they're constructed right now, Chris, I look at it and say, okay, how do you subtract and do that strategically without it being a one-off kind of a trade deadline acquisition that they might walk in free agency? Carolina, look at the rosters they've had over the years. They'll take big swings, but I feel like where they're at right now, they're due to make a move that's going to benefit them just past this season, because if they make it to game 7 of the conference final and just barely fall short, they're going to want to get to the same place next season with another heavy addition in the offseason. But that's something you and I are going to obviously look at, but Carolina they have a lot to look at, and maybe it does take trading a major roster piece off from what they have right now.
This team to me, and every time I look at them, they make a move where it might make you question it, and they seem to just have the answer. Like they got Rantanen last year, and nobody had them as a team. Like I was like shocking, I think, to everybody. We've talked about that already, but they only had him for a couple months, and then they flip him to Dallas, and they get Logan Stankoven, who has fit exactly the Hurricanes mold, where like a name comes out like, oh, maybe they move Andrei Svechnikov in a deal and they get back a piece that they can sign long term or has term already, and it's like you sit there and you look at it and you go, this doesn't make sense. But at the same time, they just seem to piece together and know what they're doing to make that team better and make a deep run. And to me, it's again hesitant on certain pieces to move, but at the same time trusting what they have done so far. And they're going to get better. They're going to make a move that makes them better. And the question is what they're giving up to make them better. But it's worked so far, and it may make fans of that team angry. We'll have to see how that goes throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and maybe they make another major splash, because we saw last year with the Rantanen deal, they were not afraid to make a big splash to bring in a guy that could impact them right away. Chris, I feel like you and I are going to be talking about a lot of big names in Carolina in the coming weeks. Once the roster freeze comes into effect and all that deadline kind of dies down, you and I are going to be looking towards the trade deadline. What does Carolina do? Because when Rantanen came in, sure, it wasn't a fit, but they still got quite the package for him. Like, you cannot deny that. Stankoven, a couple of first-round picks, and a couple of third-round picks. So,
And maybe
all
that's
things
what they
considered, yeah, you said it right there. Maybe that's what they use to acquire another big fish and add to their team. And maybe that's the move that puts them over the hump, and it becomes a snowball effect for them.
Yeah, and just whatever they add, because they're going to add, and if it's somebody in the forward department, it's just going to make their lineup so much deeper. Well, I mentioned already, Ehlers is playing on the bottom 6. Like, can you imagine adding somebody and you move somebody like Jackson Blake to the bottom 6? Like, just how much scoring you have. Like, maybe what they really need is some toughness, because you talked about the Panthers and how they have their style. The Hurricanes had their style of play. They ran up against the Panthers and it just didn't match up, and that's why they've lost the last 2 years in the Eastern Conference Finals. Maybe it's something to have that toughness, like somebody who can put the puck in the net, but somebody who also has a little physical play to their game as well. And that's what that team is missing.
And all things considering, Mikko Rantanen kind of fit that bill, but he didn't seem to gel with the way the Hurricanes were playing. all things considering is if the Hurricanes can somehow add to their lineup strategically to and the goal is to beat the other team, whether it's physically or you just outplay them. Because there's two sides of playoff hockey, Chris. Maybe they go the route where they just try to beat the team and they take a lot of blows to, going through it, but maybe that's what they have to do. But looking at the roster, the Hurricanes, they just need a bit more sandpaper to kind of round things out for them.
I agree with that. And another team in that division that is on a little bit of a streak, and we talked about them last week, is the Columbus Blue Jackets. And they've won 4 straight games since they've removed their coach and brought in a new coach. And last on Thursday, they beat the Canucks 4-1. And I'm pretty sure it was after Thursday's game. They asked Elvis Merzlikins after the game, "What's the difference between this team?" And he came out and he said right away, "The coach." Now this team, since uh, having Dean Evison take over, they've put up 4 goals per game and they've allowed 2.3 goals against. They're 6 points back now of second in the Metro Division and a playoff spot as well. And this coming week they got Ottawa, Detroit, Tampa Bay. I mean, this team seems to have turned things around, and maybe that is coaching. I mean, look at somebody like the Red Wings last season who moved Derek Lalonde and Tom McCullen came in, and they turned things around, and they were a different team all season and into this season. This is Columbus to me is now interesting. Where we just mentioned the Atlantic Division, that mess is Columbus maybe a team that we're not talking about more to fight for a wild card spot with the coaching change they've made.
And that was where I wanted to go last week, but they're in a position where it's a volatile part of their season because a coaching change could just bring a short-term jolt to the lineup. Chris, I don't know about you, and you've seen it a lot more than I have. Like Carolina or not Carolina, Detroit has made a few coaching changes over the last handful of years, whereas Winnipeg, it's kind of been a little bit more selective and whatnot. So, all things considering, it only provides a wee little jolt to the lineup, and you have to see what the team that honeymoon phase is over, and they have to get down and kind of put the elbow grease to everything and go with it because coaching changes and that, like I said, that jolt doesn't last forever. I think we're seeing Columbus in the jolt phase, and if they do get into wild card contention, that's great for them. But also, it's got to be a restructuring of the systems that are there. Stay in that position long term. Lincoln's had been quoted for what he had said about coaching changes, but we're going to see long term what this team has in store heading into the deadline. Are they going to be buyers just to kind of pad a potential playoff run, or are they going to sell off and still make the playoffs? It's got to be one of the two, and there's no in between.
You say that, and then I look back and we talked about this. They added Marshman, and then they moved Chinnikov, and it seems to me that they might be in that stage of both adding and buying. But one thing to me is right away, they got the Senators tomorrow. They win that game, they're right there in the spot for the Eastern Conference with the Panthers. If they come out and keep playing the way they have in that honeymoon phase, and they have the Stars and the Lightning, and they can keep doing what they're doing, then maybe this is for real. Like maybe they come out and they beat the Stars and the Lightning, they build off that momentum, and they are a team that we have to start watching. Now again, the whole Eastern Conference. We mentioned the Atlantic Division, but the whole Eastern Conference is just wide open. You know, Tampa Bay's kind of done their thing and had their conversation with the Atlantic. We mentioned Carolina and what they're doing all together and running away with the Metro. But after those two, and maybe even Detroit and what they're doing, it's so wide open that you can't even rule out Columbus as a team that could sneak into that third spot in the Metro. It's they're gelling right now, and it's so wide open where you're not out of it. and that could be something they sneak into.
Yeah, and Chris, I feel like at this point of the season, and I know New Jersey's 7 points back, but it does feel like outside of the Rangers, all 9 teams, they're kind of. I feel like the 9 teams in the wild card slots, they're competing in playoffs right now, or competing for playoffs and whatnot. So this is the point of the season where you kind of see what teams are made of. And I've said that a lot tonight. I know that. But Columbus could show us what they have in store. And hey, just a fun team to watch. And Bonus could be providing that jolt.
Yeah, and they're going to certainly be a team to watch the rest of the way. Another team out west in the Western Conference, the Edmonton Oilers, they are losing their superstar forward Leon Draisaitl, who is taking a leave of absence as he heads back to Germany to deal with a family illness. Chris Knobloch, the head coach of the Oilers, said, "Obviously, we're going to miss Leon, and hopefully it's not very long. And obviously, we support Leon." This is a tough loss to a team right now that sits at second place in the Pacific Division with 58 points. They have a 7-point lead on third place in the Kraken. They have 2 points behind the Golden Knights. Losing Draisaitl is a big loss. Are they going to be able to stay right where they are? Can they take first place without Leon? Are we going to have to worry about another Pacific team sneaking up for second place?
Chris, I just want to say this first and foremost. You don't like to see players take leaves of absences for any reason, and you just wish nothing but the best for the player. And I want to go from here saying Edmonton has really kind of rallied around this and gone as they've solidified themselves as a number 2 team in the Pacific in the last couple of games. This is one of those. They are one of those teams right now that they're kind of dominating the Pacific because 2 back-to-back shutouts, and all things considering, do they kind of build on this when Leon is back? I know it's short term and that's kind of come out, but is this something that kind of gives them a little bit of a bump because they're playing really good? And once Draisaitl's back, is that their kind of motivation? Okay, this is the benchmark we set when he was gone, and we're going to keep it that way.
I mean, like you said, they've outscored their opponents 11-0 the last 2 games. And now, granted, it was the Canucks and the Blues, but not having Leon, and again, wishing nothing but the best, happiness, health, like all of that is very important. But they have this stretch where being without him against the Devils and the Penguins, it's not that bad of a stretch to not have him for. Now, they are gelling and have seemed to come together. Skinner's played well. Did I just say his first name? It was Connor Ingram, right?
Something like Connor that. Ingram.
Connor Ingram. Having Connor Ingram, he seemed to have found himself in Edmonton. They are clicking on all cylinders. They're competing against Vegas for that first spot in the Pacific. They seem like a different team this season than the team that we've seen the last 2 seasons, losing the Stanley Cup Finals to the Panthers. That this could be the year for Edmonton. Now, we'll see how things go, obviously. But I like the way Edmonton's playing. Again, hope everything's okay with Draisaitl. He comes back this week because Capitals this weekend will be a big game for them.
And, yeah, that's hit the nail on the head there, Chris. Big game coming up. And I look at it I say inside or outside from the inside and whatnot. I say that a lot, and that's because when you look at games, you look at kind of how it matches up and how it impacts divisions and their standings. Chris, just looking at Edmonton, what they've done, and even just the whole Pacific Division, as you look at Anaheim, who's kind of tailing them, could be third in the Pacific, just lot to talk about and whatnot.
We could talk about the Pacific Division all night long because it's just so wide open again. Like that to me is another division just like the Atlantic. The Metro, we talked about Carolina's running away with that division. The Central, we've talked week in and week out about how that just screams it's Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota, and the only thing that might change is maybe Dallas and Minnesota flip flop. But that's the way things stand right now. The Atlantic and the Pacific are a crapshoot. And, a team we're going to get to right now is the Anaheim Ducks. They've won 3 straight games, and now all of a sudden, here they come. We talked about them earlier this season. Can they come back from a 3-game losing streak? They did. Then they went through a rough stretch. I believe it was 10 straight, if not more. Now they've won 3 straight. They're right back there. They're 2 points behind the Sharks. That's after the Sharks just beat the Panthers. But all of a sudden we create that conversation again that we had a couple weeks ago of, are the Kraken really a playoff team? Are the Sharks really a playoff? Like, who's the 2 teams that you can see from that division? And the Sharks right now, they had, and it's not like any slapdick loss. Like they beat the Stars 3-1. They beat the Kings back to back. And again, they beat the Kings in a shootout, and they beat the Kings in an overtime, one on the road and one at home. They've been doing that without Troy Terry and Leo Carlson, who have both been out. And Sedicki has stepped up. He's 5-game point streak. He has 6 points in that time span. He has points in 7 of his last 8 games. He's got on 3 goals and 5 assists. They got their tough road trip coming up. They got the Rangers at home tomorrow, and then tonight, and then they go to Colorado, Seattle, Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver. To me, that's 6 games right there. We say this, I think we said this when they had their losing streak. They got to come out with, I want to say, at least a minimum of 8, if not 10 points on the next 6 games if they want to really be back into the conversation of a playoff team.
Yeah, and Chris, just the way that Anaheim has kind of been all season, you and I have talked about volatility about this team, and they embody that around the league. They're just barely over 500. They're 24, 21, and 3 on the year. I know overtime losses and those points getting into overtime, those have really impacted the standings, but San Jose being in the position they are, they've earned the points that they have, and it feels like they're seated right about where they're supposed to be, given that 19 regulation wins and then 3 in overtime. Hey, this is the point of the year where you go and you say, hey, you find out what you're like. You kind of find out where you are, who you are, and you build the identity of your team. And Anaheim, given their goaltending situation, they're going to have to find a good number 2. But they're just, to me, I look at them as a team. They go on their hot stretches and then they lose games. Chris, I know they're a team that you kind of follow a little bit more than I do. I've watched a few Ducks games throughout the year, but them being on the West Coast, I can't stay up that late all the time. They're an interesting case to me because it feels like they could finish the year with 41 wins and 41 losses.
Looking at right now, and I didn't realize this, I messed up when I said this, but with the Sharks win tonight and the Kraken loss, the Sharks are now 3rd in the Pacific Division. The Kraken moved down to that second wild card spot and are tied with the Ducks and Kings. All 3 of them have 48 games. That, to me, I think going into Friday night, depending upon what happens the rest of this week, Friday night's game between the Kraken and the Ducks could have a playoff vibe to it. You could see what, to me, this Ducks team is really made out of. Are they ready for the playoffs? Are they ready for that jump? And that it's an early potential game that you can, like, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the Red Wings went into Montreal and, it had a playoff atmosphere, and the Red Wings scored first and they took the crowd right out of it, and then the crowd never came back. This has that kind of feel to it, and now it's at Seattle. So the Kraken will potentially have the advantage. So now the Ducks are going in a road game with a potential playoff feel to it. What is this team? And that, I think we'll get the answer after Friday night.
And Chris, I track kind of one game a week that I circle one game a week that I'm going to watch. Seattle and Anaheim Friday night. You don't shape a better game. You don't have a better game on the calendar given the standing situation at this point of the season that you can look at and say, hey, this has so much on the line between two teams that are fighting to make the playoffs and stay out of that borderline, big borderline of, hey, we barely got in or we barely missed it. So there's so much on the line. It's also pride, kind of just going off of pride for the players, because if they win this and they make the playoffs, that's awesome. And if the other team somehow makes it, there's a bit more of a grudge. So it could become a growing rivalry over time. If it's flip flop from what we're saying it might be, that's just something you got to circle on your calendar and look at long term.
Another team sitting right there, rivalry with the Ducks, with the Sharks. The Los Angeles Kings right now are sitting outside a playoff spot. And before the season it was announced, Anze Kopitar said it would be his last season. Are we potentially heading towards a playoff without Anze Kopitar? The Kings have dropped 4 straight. They've lost 6 of their last 7. Kopitar's out with an ankle injury. Their saving grace right now is 7 games they've come away with points in 5 of them. So despite losing, they're still coming away with points and keeping pace in the playoff chase. They're tied. They were tied with the Sharks entering tonight for the final wild card spot. Right now, they're tied with the Kraken and the Ducks for that final wild card spot. How would you feel if this is the year in Kopitar's last season and we don't have him in the playoffs?
Well, all things considered, it would almost be, it wouldn't do the necessary justice that Anze Kopitar is kind of deserved in his career, given what he's done too long as a captain and to just being a part of the team. It also strikes me as, what if he has second thoughts on this being the retirement season, given LA and they're not guaranteed to make the playoffs this year because they're not at that level where they're dominating like the Pacific Division, or they're making it hard for other teams to challenge for a Pacific Division spot. So, Chris, this is a very interesting point of the season for the and we're gonna see how they kind of shape up.
This to me, right away, there's 2 spots. The last spot in the Pacific and 1 wild card spot. But what worries me is this a preview for life for the Kings without Kopitar?
And it very well could be, Chris. Like, this is, I say it's, I kind of mentioned that point where maybe he has second thoughts, but maybe he commits to it because that's a big deal. That's a big deal for a lot of guys, sticking to their word. And here we go. Maybe Kopitar goes on his own terms, even if they don't make the playoffs, or maybe he comes back one last hurrah, because that's where he wants to go out, is LA makes a final run. That's something that remains to be seen. That could be a storyline that we watch.
It's certainly going to be a storyline that we're going to have to watch this season, and we'll have to talk about it more next week. Another great episode, a lot of fun tonight. Can't wait to do it again next week. Everyone, have a great week, and thank you for tuning in.
That's exactly where we are. Everybody have a great week. Chris and I enjoyed talking hockey tonight. We're going to do it again next week. See you next week, everybody. Take care.